Going over our next lesson, it's going to be about the Reformation. What we need to gain from that root word is reform. The reform is going to be centered and focused on the Catholic Church, and we're going to understand why now. The Catholic Church at this time was holding the most amount of land, possessed the most amount of money, and also was combined with the most amount of power that was held in the hand of the Pope. However, some of their money-making strategies were corrupt because in addition to the taxes that were being charged, the Catholic Church was using indulgences, which are more or less a bribe after someone were to confess their sins to lessen their time in purgatory. What we need to understand of purgatory is a waiting room before you go to heaven, but it's a very hellish waiting room. So in order to lessen your time, you do good works, or you would pay in order to achieve that. And additionally, priests would have vowed poverty when they began their services, but most didn't and were living just like kings. And what we have in the bottom is a modern day example with the Pope's current apartment. And now, in order to understand the Reformation, what we need to get from it is the earlier criticisms against the Church. So John Wycliffe states that the Church is a community of believers, that the Bible makes up the only standards of Christian beliefs and practices. Then we have Marcellus of Padua, who states that the Church needs to be governed by a council of laymen and priests and hold more power than the Pope. And finally, we have Jan Hus, who states that the Pope has no authority at all, and it should not hold the wealth it does through taxes and indulgences. So these three individuals are basically saying that there are major changes that need to be done towards the priest, towards the Pope, towards the power and wealth that the Catholic Church has. But by Hus directly stating that the Pope has no authority in religion ended up being his downfall, because in 1415 Hus is executed. Being that we have a small sample of what the Reformation is based upon, we can then turn into what the Reformation is about. So we have Martin Luther, who was a lawyer turned monk. He was turned monk after an out-of-body experience, so to say, and he did this as thanking God of allowing him to live through what he thought would be his last days. And so while he was a monk, Luther was very studious. He was constantly studying the scriptures, and his belief was that scriptures were the key to faith. And that's what we're going to see now, because in 1517, Luther posts his 95 Theses about theology and about what is going wrong with the Catholic Church at the time on the church doors in Wittenberg. So from there, he were to challenge anyone to prove his points wrong, and not many individuals came close to even doing so. Then in 1520, Luther wrote a book titled Freedom of a Christian. And what this book really did was describe to a T what his theological beliefs are. And getting into that, we have three of the most important here. Is that faith alone would lead to salvation. Every believer is a, quote, priest. And he also goes directly against the power of the Pope, saying that there is nothing in the scriptures about papacy power. So these 3 points here are among all the ones that he makes in his 95 Theses and the book, but are just a brief example of what he sees the church needs to change about their beliefs and about what they're portraying to everyone else. And if you want to ask why wasn't he executed like Hus, the man in the bottom corner, Frederick the Wise was an elector of Saxony. Saxony is one of the Germanic tribes, the Germanic states that were active at the time, and he protects Luther from any ill effects of the Pope. So now, being able to understand one individual about the Reformation, we need to understand the second. And the second key figure of the Reformation is John Calvin. Calvin was a man that would study religion and was very intelligent about religion, but he did not have some of the religious insight that Luther did as a monk. So, Calvin and Luther, some of their beliefs are similar. However, in 1535, we're able to clearly identify the largest difference between the two religions, and that's predestination. What predestination is the distinction between those considered the elect that are determined to reach salvation and those who aren't. There's a very slim number of people who are God's elect, and they don't know. So Calvin is saying that everyone needs to live the best life they can in the eyes of God in order to even hope that they're the elect. And so getting deeper into what Calvin believes, here's a straight side-by-side against Luther. Luther believes in salvation for all through the Scriptures, that reading the Scriptures, understanding the Scriptures, and being able to form your own opinion about the Scriptures and follow the Scriptures are how individuals are going to be able to live their lives and achieve salvation. But however, Calvin believes in a select few who are saved by God, and that no matter what others do in their lives, no matter how religious they are, no matter how much they follow the Scriptures, attend Mass, and just follow the Word of God, they will not be saved. So basically this is saying the elect is able to do whatever and anything they want with their lives, and since they are the elect, this is what's going to save them and not someone else. So being that the large theology part of the lesson is done, we're going to briefly get into the English Reformation, because although it is not about religion and not deeply religious, it is very important to understand. So we already know that the Catholic Church held the most power and the most money. England at the time was following the Catholic religion. And King Henry VIII, who was in the top corner, all just wanted an heir that was a son. So his wife, Catherine of Aragon, is unable to produce a son. And King Henry, blaming her, wants to be able to annul his marriage, which is basically a divorce, and find a new woman that would be able to give him a son. The Pope, Clement VII, does not agree to this because that's not what the Catholic Church stands for. So from this point, the Church receives his news and is then like, yeah, this is done. So what the king does, is create his own religion. The king breaks off from the Catholic Church. He confiscates church land, makes it his own, and he creates his own religion. He also takes all revenue, taxes, anything that the church gets, and directly gives it to himself. And so, in 1534, it's official, the King of England declares himself the head of the English Church. The English Church became known as Anglican, and it is loosely based off the same beliefs of Martin Luther. So now being able to understand all of this, it's going to set up what future history looks like, because the red area is where Luther's predominantly heard and theologicized, and what we get in the purple is where Calvin is. And you can see that Calvin reaches Scotland, Calvin is based in Geneva, Switzerland, and Luther is based in what later becomes Germany after the unifications of the Germanic states. And so Calvinism is spread to different parts of the world, and Calvinism is what creates America. Because the first English settlement that was in America and was remotely successful was the Pilgrims in Massachusetts. They were a sect of Calvins. Sect is a group that has different beliefs than the overall religion. In Scotland, the Calvins were known as Presbyterians, which also then becomes its own religion. And then in France, the Calvinists are known as Huguenots, and that group of religion is going to be very important for future lessons and for future times. Also, religion becomes big in wars. Most of the future wars are fought over religious implications and over religious ties. And so here we have the growth of religion starting from Christianity. We're able to see that the Church of England is right here. And here we're able to see Lutheranism, Presbyterianism, Quakers, who are also a form of Protestants, and what we know as the people who created Pennsylvania. So what we need to understand about the Protestant Reformation is that in those two words are basically the major keys of what this age is. There's a protest and there's a need for reform. The protest directly comes against the Catholic Church, and the reform is coming in the form of new religions. So what's the most important here is to understand that Calvin and Luther are protesting what is wrong with the Catholic Church and reforming it into their own new religions. Their religions formed by people following them, people speaking their theologies, and thus the religion is born. So that's what we need to understand about this entire time period. So what we're going to be doing for tomorrow's lesson is you're going to additionally watch these 3 videos, which will give you a deeper understanding. The first is a crash course video, which will just wrap up everything a lot more smoothly for some of you if you need that, and also give it to you in a different perspective. And the other 2 videos are key about what we're going to be doing in class tomorrow, because those are directly talking about Luther and Calvin's own doctrines and their theologies, which is, again, what we're doing in class tomorrow. So that's going to be everything for today.